Hello, so for this month's talk, we are happy to have Catherine Armitage. She is the head of digital policy at the World Federation of Advertisers, and today she will introduce their manifesto on online data transparency.
So the World Federation of Advertisers is the only global organisation representing brand owners and client-side marketers. We bring together over 100 different global brands and 60 national advertiser associations across 6 different continents. The WFA Data Transparency Manifesto is a really important piece of work for WFA. It sets out the principles which guide us when we do all of our work related to digital governance and digital policy. The WFA Data Transparency Manifesto focuses on 3 areas. The first one is all about the consumer, the actual user experience. So as brands, we want to ensure that people have full transparency, control and choice over how their data is collected and used for marketing purposes. That means giving people really meaningful control over the data which they share and simple and intuitive means to control access to it. The second part of the WFA Data Transparency Manifesto is focused on responsible data supply chains. So all brand owners work with a very wide supply chain when it comes to data. And the entire digital advertising ecosystem comes together, particularly when it comes to questions around the use of people's data in a responsible way. So as brand owners, we think that it's really important to have full oversight and transparency of the supply chain that you're working with throughout the entire digital advertising experience to ensure that data is being used and collected in a responsible and ethical way that holds with the values of the company and the brand owner that's at the end of that supply chain. The third part of the Data Transparency Manifesto is about responsible data management. So it's more of an internal thing, but it's about understanding as a company what data you hold, how you're collecting it, how it's being used across different parts of the organisation, and really instilling in the entire company, everybody who works in the company, certain values and principles about how they are working with consumer data and what not to do as well. The WFA Data Transparency Manifesto is really just a starting point. We don't think it's going to solve everything overnight, but it's a starting point for us as brand owners to say what needs to change and what should the ideal solution look like. But obviously we can't do this alone. This is something which the entire digital advertising ecosystem needs to work together to achieve, because full data transparency isn't easy to achieve. And it requires the cooperation and interaction of the entire supply chain, not just brand owners. And so actually this is somewhere where we see EDAA playing a really important role, because EDAA brings together all of those different parts of the digital advertising ecosystem, including brand owners, ad tech, publishers, for example. And it's really a place where I think the ethos of transparency, control and choice is still very much alive. So we see EDAA definitely as a place that can bring together all those different interests with the spirit and the objective of giving people meaningful control and choice over how their data is used when it comes to online advertising. The icon is a really, really important and very useful tool that the industry has at its disposal to connect with consumers, because the icon is something which is, I think, universally recognised by people, and it gives a sign and it gives a place where people can go to get more information. So when we're talking about transparency, we're talking about ethics, a lot of that comes down to also communicating with people about what's really going on behind the scenes. And I think education is a really important part of that. So the icon, I think, is very important because it's been established as a kind of universally recognised tool that can help people have more information about what's going on the murky world of online advertising. And therefore I think EDAA has done a fantastic job in making the icon an important tool for the industry, but also in the eyes of consumers. And it's something which has loads and loads of potential and loads of possibility when it comes to thinking about how we can improve the way that information is given to people about how their data is used for online advertising. So actually, one of the things that we've learned over the past few months since we put out the Data Transparency Manifesto is that the concept itself of data transparency is quite difficult to grasp. Actually, it's quite vague and it's quite conceptual. And we actually did a piece of consumer research that showed that consumers themselves, they don't think in these terms about data transparency. They just think about my privacy, my data, using different online services. So the phrase data transparency is perhaps not particularly useful. We know what it means, but it's quite hard to get a grasp on that. And different people will have different interpretations of what it means. So actually what we're doing now with the members of WFA's Data Transparency Advisory Board is we're looking at how we can broaden the scope to not just talk about data transparency, but talk about data ethics more broadly, because actually that's what it all comes down to. It comes down to what are the ethical principles that you're using to guide the way that you collect and use data when it comes to advertising. So in 2019, we're really going to be looking at exploring what is data ethics, what are the things that we should be doing as brand owners to really sort of set what we think data ethics looks like in this context. And then of course working with the rest of the digital advertising ecosystem to think about what that means in a broader way and how we can apply that to things that we have in place at the moment in terms of how people manage and control their data online. So data transparency and data ethics more broadly is something which we're going to be exploring at WFA's Global Marketer Week in Lisbon.
A toast to our Global Marketer Week hosts, the JA, as well as the Global Marketer Week 2018. Kampai!
We're going to be holding a policy forum as part of that session on the 26th of March. And in that session, we're going to be bringing together a number of different WFA members, different brand owners, to talk about actually the integration between marketing and policy within their organisations. We're running a fantastic piece of research with Edelman at the moment, which is exploring different attitudes to how does policy work with marketing, how does marketing work with policy, and we're going to be presenting that at that session. And then we're going to be exploring, you know, what are the issues, what are the opportunities, what are the actual topics where policy and marketing really need to come together a bit more. And I think that digital advertising is probably going to be a big part of that, especially when we start talking about digital governance and data. And I think that, you know, all the work that we do at EDAA is something which has a very concrete impact in terms of marketing and needs to be integrated with the advertising community, but also of course a sort of policy side of things as well. And I think that when we talk about how do you bring policy and marketing together, EDAA is in a really interesting place to explore that idea, because ultimately this is the work that EDAA does is very much linked to what's happening in marketing today.